Welcome to this episode of the story. Have you subscribed yet? Chapter 117, The Spiritual Springs Mutation and the Town's Chaos. Sumu was fully focused on attempting to merge the reverse-time spiritual power with the spiritual springs power, his perception entirely immersed in the subtle interactions between the two within his body. However, fusing spiritual powers was far more complex and dangerous than he had imagined, akin to controlling two surging torrents that repelled each other. Suddenly, the previously calm spiritual spring, as if triggered by some forbidden mechanism, erupted with spiritual power like a volcanic explosion, gushing 疯狂 outward. The first to feel this anomaly were the young disciples practicing near the spring. They only felt an overwhelming force rushing toward them. Before they could react, they were thrown backward by the Quangbao spiritual power and crashed heavily to the ground. What's happening? A disciple cried out in panic, his voice sounding tiny amid the chaos. The spiritual spring's power, like a runaway wild horse, spread 疯狂 across the entire Lingxi town, with the spring at its center. Houses in the town creaked under the impact of this mighty power. Many roofs torn off directly, tiles flying everywhere. Pedestrians on the streets were knocked off their feet by the spiritual power. Some were even drawn into swirling currents of spiritual energy, struggling desperately but unable to break free. A woman holding a child stumbled and fell under the impact. The child's cries were instantly drowned out by the chaotic noise. The woman screamed绝望 for help, her eyes filled with fear and helplessness. Upon sensing the disturbance, the elders of Lingxi town hurried from their respective cultivation chambers, gazing at the chaotic scene before them. The great elder's face turned grave, and he shouted loudly, "Everyone, don't panic! Stay calm!" But his voice was quickly drowned out by the howling of the spiritual spring's power. At this moment, Sumu was filled with remorse and anxiety. He knew well that all this was caused by his attempt to merge the spiritual powers, and he must find a way to control the situation as soon as possible. Enduring the severe pain from the spiritual power backlash, he channeled his reverse-time spiritual power, trying to calm the 疯狂 gushing spiritual spring energy. The reverse-time spiritual power, like a clear stream, flowed gently toward the surging spring power. However, the spring's power, like an enraged beast, refused to be calmed by Sumu. Instead, it chonzi his reverse-time power even more violently. Sumu's body trembled slightly under the collision of these two mighty forces, and blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. But Sumo did not give up. Gritting his teeth, he concentrated all his dingshen, continuously infusing reverse-time spiritual power into the spring's energy, trying to find a balance between them and restore calm to the spring. On the town square, some cultivators with higher cultivation levels spontaneously formed a defensive formation to protect the surrounding townsfolk. They formed seals with their hands, and spiritual power ninju into shields in front of them, resisting the rampage of the spring's power. But the spring's power was too strong. The shields trembled continuously, on the verge of shattering at any moment. "Hold on! We can't let the townsfolk get hurt!" Ling Feng shouted loudly, his forehead covered in sweat, his hands trembling slightly from the depletion of spiritual power. Meanwhile, similarly tense scenes were unfolding in other corners of Lingxi town. Townsfolk supported each other amid the chaos, struggling to find safe places to take shelter. The cultivators, disregarding their own safety, tried to stabilize the Shikong situation. The entire Lingxi town was plunged into chaos and panic. Su Mu, as the initiator of this chaos, was doing his utmost to control the spiritual spring's power and save the town from disaster. His figure appeared so small amid the 疯狂 surging spiritual energy, yet filled with unwavering determination. A tough battle was raging fiercely, and the fate of Lingxi town now hung on whether Sumu could successfully control the spiritual spring's power. The story continues. More exciting content is coming up. Subscribe as soon as possible.